Hey there, Epic Infiltrators!
Welcome to another flashlight.
This week we'll be talking through Hasbro's ownership of Dungeons & Dragons, the open game license, and the future of D&D's relationship with the community.
Let's roll initiative.
So, by 2023, Dungeons & Dragons, 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, had the most players and the highest profits in its history. And, you know, Wizards of the Coast, I don't want to valorize them or anything, but they made a bunch of announcements about, like, for example, like committing to rectify or ameliorate their history of racist tropes in the games. And, like, you know, this had kind of received a lot of goodwill from game journalists and people who ran actual plays. And I kind of want to say maybe even like cautious optimism from the overall TTRPG community, if that's not like too sweeping to say. And then, yeah, it's 2023, and then they announced a new approach to intellectual property in gaming that just torpedoed all of that.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it tanked everything pretty fast. The company did backtrack quite quickly, but the whole situation really exemplified how Wizards of the Coast, how WotC and their corporate overlords Hasbro, they kind of lost the thread on the kind of moves that had made them so successful in the first place.
What was their announcement on their change in?
They're changing intellectual property rules around third-party supplements.
What does that mean? Like,
we'll get into that in this episode. Yeah,
is that the episode?
That's the episode.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that's the OGL controversy.
Oh,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Hasbro, D&D, and the OGL controversy.
You know it.
What's OGL stand for?
Open game license. From the intro, it's the same. It's that thing. Yeah. So, like, a disclaimer before we get into this. We reached a really modern era. We were talking about something that happened in 2023. It's going to feel a lot more apparent to our listeners that we're zooming in on like a specific thread in the history of D&D rather than trying to talk about everything that WotC was doing in 2023. And that's, like, for anyone listening, that's deliberate. Like, we could make a whole podcast season just about the business decisions of Wizards of the Coast in the last 5 years, right? We could make a whole podcast just about Dungeons and Dragons and intellectual property.
Right.
We're not doing that right now.
That's season 4.
Season 4, just a harrowing deep dive into, like, all these legal cases. We're going to go to law school between now and season 4.
Well, we got to get crunchy.
Yeah, you'll be hearing us be like, I'm Jake Esquire.
Do you get an Esquire when you go to law school?
Isn't that Esquire means you're a lawyer, right?
I thought that was a men's magazine.
Maybe that's just a Canadian thing, because in Canada, lawyers can put Esquire after their name.
I think that might be a Canadian thing.
Cool. Well, season 4, we'll be talking just about legal stuff. We'll be Jake and Riley, attorneys at law. Yes, this is all legal advice. But so far, we're not lawyers, and this is not legal advice. I mean, unless you're secretly a lawyer and you've been holding out this whole time.
Do I have an Esquire after my name?
That's true. You got me there. You're not a lawyer. Yeah.
There you go.
So, as we previously discussed, Hasbro bought WotC back in 1999 for $325 million, or like $607 million in today's dollars. Huge amount of money. And for quite a while, it continued to operate with like a degree of independence from Hasbro on big long-term decisions. Like until 2021, when a reorganization made it its own separate top-level division within Hasbro. This made sense at the time because, as we talked about in the last flashlight, its revenue was really overshadowing Hasbro overall. Right? Like,
it was making like more money than
the rest of Hasbro in some quarters.
Honestly, though, like, Hasbro's all in on pretty old-fashioned, like, until Barbie the movie comes out. I don't like.
So Hasbro and Mattel, as we discussed in a previous episode, are different.
Oh no, not again! Are you serious?
We literally
I'm very sorry, listeners.
But yeah, so Hasbro, they have this Wizards of the Coast as a division, which includes not just D&D, but also Magic the Gathering, also like licensing for Baldur's Gate, things like that.
Yeah.
That is
and Battleship. Is Battle?
So I'm describing what's in Wizards of the Coast.
I know, and I'm just
Battleship
trying to.
is in Hasbro overall, we think. I'm gonna look that. I will not look that up.
Don't look.
I'm pretty sure Battleship is owned by Hasbro. Please don't sue us if it's not.
Okay, I will not talk about any other things that have nothing to do with the topic at hand.
I mean, go for it. What else is on your mind, Riley?
Apparently, all Mattel stuff.
Oh no.
Oh God! All right, sorry,
back on
listeners.
track.
Okay, back on track.
Yeah.
Can we roll a die to get Riley's?
Do you want to roll some dice? Here's a big bag of dice. Just roll some.
I feel like I rolled confusion earlier.
Yeah. Give me a wisdom saving throw. So roll a d20 and add whatever you think your wisdom save modifier is.
Oh, I keep pulling.
So I'll get you a d20. 1 sec.
I keep pulling the wrong sided dice.
Yeah. So this bag has compartments in it. Shout out to Jason for getting me this bag.
All right. Okay. Rolling wisdom saving throw.
Yep.
It's an 11.
11 on the die. What do you add to your wisdom saves? I'd say pretty high wisdom.
Do I? Not on mic.
That's true. Okay.
Not right now.
The mic is a cursed artifact that gives you -10 to wisdom saving throws.
Yeah.
Well, rest in pieces. Anyway, what were we talking about? Right. 2021, Wizards of the Coast became a division within Hasbro, like a top-level division. And because its revenue was like overshadowing Hasbro overall.
Right.
And then in January 2022, the CEO of WotC, Chris Cox, became the new CEO of Hasbro overall. So like the CEO of Wizards of the Coast became the Hasbro CEO, and like the leadership of Hasbro effectively became people who had run Wizards of the Coast. And like, to be clear, these are not people who like came up through the gaming industry. Chris Cox joined Wizards of the Coast from Microsoft, and before that was at Procter & Gamble. At this point, it's like big business people are running this, right?
Right.
And not like it's the top level leadership did not have maybe the connection to the community they had back in the old days. And I'm not saying it was good the way it worked in the old days. We discussed all like the jump scare lawsuits. I think a lot of decisions were made that were like not great in various ways. But by 2022, it's like the CEO is someone from P&G and then Microsoft. Like it's business people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christoph Cox was the name of my professor in college.
Shout out to Riley's professor, Christoph Cox.
We'll link to one of his books.
We absolutely can link to one of his books in the show notes.
Philosophy of Sound.
Very cool. I think it's a different guy.
It is. I think it's a different guy too.
But we'll link to one of his books regardless. Yeah. So we're mentioning this up top. Like the reason I really want to get into the idea of this WotC CEO becoming the Hasbro CEO in 2022 is because when people talk about this OGL controversy in 2023, sometimes there's this conflation that happens where people are like, oh, it happened because like Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast and immediately started to like stifle its creativity. And that's not what happened, right? Hasbro bought Wizards of the Coast in 1999, right?
Yeah.
There's probably people who work at Wizards of the Coast who are younger than Wizards of the Coast being part of Hasbro. It's like a quarter century of integration. And by the time the OGL controversy starts in late 2022, Hasbro is led by a former Wizards of the Coast executive, right? So it's not the case that like the long arm of the sinister multinational corporate overlord reached down into the sweet little protected coral reef of delicate tropical fish. It's that this is a big business.
Yeah.
And they were making decisions that were, happening at scale, quite removed from any on-the-ground reality. And but it's not that like the company was like newly acquired or newly under the thumb or anything like that. But so anyway, let's back up, set the stage. Back when TSR had run D&D, they'd been embroiled in a ton of lawsuits. We're not going to get into this right now. We could spend a whole season on it. They've been suing a bunch of other creators for using terms adjacent to their intellectual property, while also getting sued for using other people's intellectual property.
Yes.
Like lawsuits were flowing in both directions.
Yeah. Okay.
And their own staff were suing them for not getting royalties for the intellectual property, or former staff, I should say. But when Wizards of the Coast bought up TSR, with that new, more professional leadership had come in the 90s a very different view of intellectual property. By the time Wizards of the Coast bought up TSR, like WotC was already this like multi-million-dollar company with a license to publish the Pokemon card game in the United States. So they were like a big, sophisticated business, right? They had lawyers.
Yeah.
They had a compliance department, right? They kind of compared to TSR, which was, it started out as amateurs who loved the hobby, and didn't have a lot of business experience on this scale. The Wizard of the Coast was founded by Boeing systems analysts with MBAs. It became a big company. They definitely had the resources to think about intellectual property in a more sophisticated way where they'd talk to lawyers and things like that. And specifically in 2000, this big sophisticated business released D&D 3rd edition under a new license called the Open Gaming License, or OGL. In this episode, we're going to call it OGL 1.0 to distinguish from what comes later. This is a really generous license. It let third-party creators use the classes, monsters, and spells without fear of lawsuit, and to indicate compatibility with D&D. You could use it in perpetuity. You could build off of other people's work. It really was built to allow people to collaborate and build third-party modules that fit in with the original content and then also fit in with each other.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. It's worth discussing why they did this, right? We have an interview from WotC's then VP of Tabletop Gaming, Ryan Dancy, explaining the decision. We'll link to it in the show notes. In that interview, Dancy talks about the idea of network externalities. This is like one of those things that companies like Microsoft and Meta and Google have exploited over time, right? Network externalities, the idea there is like, once a system is the most popular system, it continues to be the most popular system because everyone knows how to play it, and there's third-party compatibility, everyone centers on using it, everyone develops new stuff for it, and like there's that ecosystem. He name checks like the new general public license in Linux and like the software open source movement. But like his big point is that it's good for business for D&D to remain the universal standard system, even if that means allowing these third-party products
to exist. To exist and use their system.
Yes, to use the system, to use a lot of the IP, right? The intellectual property. I'm actually going to quote from that interview because I think there's a paragraph in there that, and we'll link to this in the show notes, that really gets at this idea of why a big company would let people use their assets, right? A little bit. I'll quote from it. The logical conclusion says that reducing the cost to other people to publishing and supporting the core D&D game to zero should eventually drive support for all other game systems to the lowest level possible in the market, create customer resistance to the introduction of new systems, and the result of all that support redirected to the D&D game will be to steadily increase the number of people who play D&D, thus driving sales of the core books. This is a feedback cycle. The more effective the support is, the more people play D&D. The more people play D&D, the more effective the support is.
Yes.
Right. This is like...
It keeps growing like the blob.
I mean, it really makes you think about like what Facebook or Adobe think about their positions when they think about third-party compatibility.
Yeah.
Right? Like being the market leader in industry with this kind of network effect, like it really helps you entrench yourself as the industry standard.
Yes. You want to be the network itself.
Yeah. You want to be the ones who are kind of setting the standard for the whole network, and then everyone meets you where you are.
Right. And that's Amazon for
Yeah.
real world things, I guess.
That is increasingly Amazon for a lot of things. Yeah. I think it's Microsoft for a lot of things as well, right? If we think about like Excel or something like that.
Gotta love Outlook.
Oh,
it works really well, is the thing. And Word.
Yeah,
they're both tools that have been around for a long time, and they're really good.
They are.
Yeah.
Riley, thank you so much for mentioning this week's sponsor, Microsoft. We're actually we're interviewing Clippy next week. So
oh my God, we got Clippy?
We got Clippy.
Clippy was never a help, and Clippy would crash my old computer. Like he would pop up on the screen, and we didn't have enough graphic processing or whatever.
For Clippy?
Yeah. Yeah. So he would kind of like just freeze up and,
I feel
Well,
bad
I mean,
for
but this is
Clippy.
like 2002,
This is 2002.
3-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is actually after the OGL 1.0 was already introduced.
Dang.
Speaking of the OGL, a couple issues did pop up. The first was it generated hundreds of new supplement publishers all at once. In 1998 and 1999, there were, and we'll link to stats on this in the show notes. In 1998 and 1999, only 20 new companies started publishing TTRPG books in the US. But then in 2000 and 2001, right after they'd released the OGL, 78 new entrants, right? And of those 78, 51 were using OGL. So there's this explosion of companies that are publishing TTRPG source books, and the vast majority of them are using OGL. They're making 3rd edition compatible supplements. By 2003, there were around 377 different OGL compatible products on the market. So I don't know like what exactly Ryan Dancy was like hoping for in terms of like making this a new industry standard. But like there's now hundreds of source books that use the OGL and that build onto 3rd edition, entering the market all at once in an era when publishing was harder, right? There weren't as many source books coming out. A lot of them were paper only. And still there were just like hundreds of new ones coming out really quickly. Yeah. And so it actually made it a little bit hard for Wizards of the Coast to release new supplementary source books because every subgenre, every mechanic, there was a third-party supplement for it.
Yeah.
And the other issue was one of quality. Some of the supplements, especially in an era when you couldn't really get reviews for things and it was hard to find information on the internet,
Just low quality.
they were kind of shitty. Yeah.
Dang, shitty.
yeah.
We got to earn that explicit.
We gotta swear more.
I mean, I'm still hesitant to swear. We got it cleared, but
Yeah.
no more meta talk on
No
them.
more meta talk.
Yeah.
So there's a supplement from this era called The Book of Erotic Fantasy. And it's actually very high quality. It's thoughtfully put together. Wizards of the Coast, however, did not want The Book of Erotic Fantasy being like, OGL, D&D 3rd edition compatible on the
Even
cover.
though it was tasteful?
It wasn't necessarily tasteful, but it was well done. It's like quite a long book with a lot of mechanics in it. If we can track it down, we'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay.
So they actually did modify the license a little bit to address questions of quality and also sexually explicit products.
Yeah.
But like it honestly didn't change very much. Like the original license, super permissive.
Right, yeah.
And then these changes they make are really just kind of around the edges. Like, it can't be complete crap. It can't be overtly about sex mechanics, and that's about it. And the market was flooded with hundreds of these third-party supplements. It really did make D&D 3.5 a wildly successful system. And the people still play today. 4th edition didn't use the OGL, but 5th edition, like the current industry standard, like the current standard does. We talked about this last week. D&D 5th edition is the most successful tabletop game by far ever. The largest ecosystem of third-party publishers, streamers, other creators around it. We're making a podcast season about D&D because of this, right?
Yeah.
And so now caught up to the end of 2022, where Hasbro, under the new leadership, sees this world where, they have this really permissive third-party license. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of publishers. Their system is incredibly successful, and they're about to blow it all up.
Wow.
Yeah. So December 2022, January 2023.
And they're gonna blow it up by just like how you're about to tell me how they're gonna blow it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You got the fuse.
Well, yeah. So I'm gonna actually link to a Gizmodo piece in the show notes that
Shouts to Gizmodo.
Shoutouts to Gizmodo. Yeah.
Is it Gizmodo still around?
I think they are. Yeah. Yeah. And in this era, this piece is actually, it's interesting to read because like there's so much confusion and so much like, wait, what are they doing here? Like
Yeah.
they're trying to figure out as these leaks come out. Because at this point, everyone had been making, it's like December 2022, January 2023. At this point, everyone's been making content for 5th edition under the OGL, which is a, quote, perpetual worldwide non-exclusive license, right? And they've been doing that since 2014. And now something new was coming. We'll link to some rundowns of the proposed new OGL that they wanted, but here are some of the highlights. First off, the new license deauthorized the existing license. Everyone would have to switch over to the new one for all their existing works.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I guess, yeah.
Not clear if that's legally like a thing you can do with a perpetual worldwide non-exclusive license. But no one wants to be like, no one's going to be sued by Hasbro to find out.
Yeah.
Right. Like, effectively, they can say that and you have to do it. Right. Speaking of which, the new license could be modified at any time with 30 days notice. So you'd have to accept the new license, which could be modified
whenever.
Yeah. New content would always need approval from WotC. So you basically had to, under the new proposed new OGL, you would have had to produce the whole supplement before getting that final approval.
That sounds like there's that sounds like horrible. Like, I don't know. I don't understand how you could do you could continue doing any type of like game playing, or if you already had a bunch of books.
Yes.
And you had to switch them over.
Yes.
That's already a nightmare.
Yes.
If you have to run it by Big Daddy.
So this is for new content.
New content. Yes. You have to run it by Big Daddy Hasbro and WotC every time you wanted to make a change or do anything.
Yes.
That's a headache.
And
that makes the entire ecosystem not possible.
Yeah, I think for like the very biggest ones, right?
Well,
like
I know
Press,
like if you have
to take the risk.
Sure, yeah.
But like if we tried to put out a supplement and we spent 2 years of work on it, and then we'd have to just send it to WotC and see what they said.
Yeah. There goes season 5.
There you go. And yeah, so WotC said they wanted to check for hateful and discriminatory content. And in a way, I mean, that sounds reasonable.
Sure. Yeah.
However, with all due respect, given the history of Wizards of the Coast, they may not be the best entity to adjudicate hateful and discriminatory content.
True.
Yeah. So anyway, now a big sticking point. Any revenue from the licensed product above $50,000 would need to be reported to WotC, and any revenue above $750,000 would have a 25% royalty to WotC.
Oh.
Yeah.
Got that coin.
Yeah. So like that to be clear, the first threshold is anything above 50K reported, anything above 750K royalties. Right. This is like nothing the company had ever wanted before. Obviously, this is pretty onerous for a small publisher to report revenue from these licensed products. And it's also not clear for the customers they're not collecting royalties from. Why are they reporting it? Like, what benefit does that even serve? Anyway, once your content was licensed, WotC would be able to use it, all of it, forever in any way they chose.
Cool.
Yeah.
Great.
So there's a lot of other stuff in there.
Use it forever.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
There's a lot of other stuff in there, like making Kickstarter the official preferred crowdfunding platform.
Oh, God.
But some of that, like, WotC backed down on it quickly. Feedback was not positive.
Not positive.
There was an era of open letters signed by like all these previous like D&D writers, publishers of Kobold Press and MCDM, announcing they'd be building whole new gaming systems rather than continuing to work with WotC.
You know what? We're just going to build our own gaming system.
Fully. I mean, and that's kind of, we talked about this previously. It's a little bit what Paizo did with Pathfinder.
Yeah.
Right? Like they can do that.
At a certain point, if it's like your hands are that tied in a way that it logistically doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make sense. That's a really good way to put it. We'll link to a Financial Times article that accuses Wizards of the Coast of killing a profitable product for no clear reason.
They need to do a wisdom saving throw.
Honestly, like, yeah, these new restrictions were so onerous, and like, it doesn't make sense in retrospect. Like, everything was going so well.
Things were going so well. You
like,
had it all figured out. You had to just
honestly,
kick back and just print money upstairs or watch the money get printed from the C-suite.
I mean, kind of, yeah. Like this game was beloved. The
Yeah.
community of of streamers and third-party publishers was huge.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of locked into your system.
Yeah.
And
You didn't goof up too much, or people
Well,
were letting it.
they
They goofed up a
did,
lot,
but-
but you could let stuff slide. But
I think also, like, if you're a streamer or a publisher, you know that if you switch away from this system, you're going to have fewer fans. So
Yeah.
that meant that they could mess up a lot, and it would kind of be forgiven or glossed over by a lot of people.
but you got to get to the final level of messing up.
Right. And so, like, before they did this, like, according to Hasbro's annual SEC report, 2022, the Wizards of the Coast and digital gaming top level division had an operating profit of $538 million. That's more than 100% of Hasbro's profit, as we discussed before. The net revenue from tabletop gaming, and this is a slightly different metric now, net revenue from tabletop gaming, had increased from $660 million in 2020 to $1,067 million in 2022. So, like, when people came out of lockdown, the business got 50% larger, which is...
Dang.
Yeah, this is incredibly profitable, growing really fast. The whole community around it, like that network externalities quote, is like from 2000. That happened. It was working, right? Like they were locked in as the standard, as the platform everyone was using, and then they were like, we're gonna antagonize everyone. Whole lot of negative feedback. Open letters. People started making alternative systems. A bunch of people proclaiming they'd cancel their D&D Beyond subscription. Streamers and podcasters starting to be like, I'm gonna move to other platforms. Wizards of the Coast tried a couple times to walk back various aspects of the new license, and then just completely caved. As of summer 2024, and things may change before this episode comes out, who knows. But as of now, it looks like future versions of D&D won't be released under any gaming-specific license, but rather under a Creative Commons license.
Oh. The people won.
Well, I mean, in a way, yes, right? Like, in a way, the royalty reporting and the need for approval and stuff, those aren't going to happen. So in that sense, the people won. But like that original OGL, the OGL 1.0, it was an intellectual property document designed with TTRPGs in mind, right? It really let this third-party creation and publication and iteratively building on each other thrive in a way that you can't always do with Creative Commons, right? Because by accepting that license, you really accepted that other people could just build off of your work in that way. In a way that Creative Commons doesn't oblige you to do as the person who's using it on their work, right?
Well, which Creative Commons is it?
There's
There's different tiers.
Yes, we'll link in the show notes to a rundown by an actual lawyer.
Okay.
Yes, because this is an area where I think that actual people who know how law works, an actual Esquire, can probably help a little bit more. Paizo, the company that makes Pathfinder, has tried releasing an alternative version that they call the Orc license, but it hasn't gained as much traction yet. Notably, Paizo doesn't actually use their Orc license on Pathfinder Infinite, their third-party sourcebook store. And so it's not exactly a vote of confidence.
Yeah.
So like it really does feel like Creative Commons is becoming the norm. Which, you know, as you say, people did kind of win. Like, it could have been much worse. But we are kind of at the end of this era of licenses, I think, that are designed for TTRPGs.
Specifically.
Yeah. So that's where we're at right now. And we will follow this up, I guess, in a future season when Wizards of the Coast makes more questionable decisions.
Campaign Spotlight Esquire.
Yeah.
Lawyer school.
How hard could it be?
I'm going to bring a crowbar to the bar exam.
Wait, why?
So I can hit it?
Okay.
Wordplay?
Oh, I get it. Yeah. I'll bring.
Womp womp.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. That's terrible.
I'll bring a cocktail shaker to the bar exam. Is that anything?
Yeah, that's better. You're building on it. Are we clown lawyers?
We're like rules lawyers, I think.
Rules lawyers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, in other news, we mentioned the Book of Erotic Fantasy, which was a supplement from 2006 that WotC really didn't want associated with D&D. Which is funny because in 2002, WotC had released an edgy D&D supplement of their own called Book of Vile Darkness, which had themes of sex and drugs and violence and had an age restriction to purchase in some jurisdictions.
Dang, that sounds so cool. Did it smoke cigarettes?
I'll read some. So I want you to know what edgy sounded like in the 2000s.
Okay.
So I've taken some sentences from these two books. And Riley's going to guess whether they're from the official Book of Vile Darkness.
Okay, Book of Vile Darkness.
Or the third-party supplement Book of Erotic Fantasy that had
Erotic
WotC
Fantasy.
so worried they had to change the OGL rules. Are you ready? I'm going to read you a sentence. Is this from official sanctioned Book of Vile Darkness or like way too out there, not acceptable Book of Erotic Fantasy? You ready?
I'm ready.
Masochists often grin with a sickening glee when struck in combat, and they make noises of ecstasy even as they suffer terrible wounds.
Ooh. Ooh.
Is that from the official content or the third-party source book that WotC didn't approve of?
I feel like is that third-party source book?
That is from the official content.
Official content?
That is from the Book of
Okay.
Vile Darkness.
Dang, that's Vile Darkness.
I'm going to read you another sentence. It's very early 2000s. A homosexual character can be chaste, moralistic, prudish, and tolerant, or rampant with his or her sexuality, just as a heterosexual person can be.
Oh, that sounds vile and dangerous. I see what's going on.
That's from the third-party supplement.
That's bad. I mean, you know what? I know what's going on.
The third-party supplement is really trying to be like, you can
Sex
have
positive.
in an era-appropriate way. It feels pretty dated now, but definitely it was written by people who felt differently about sex than what WotC wanted people to feel at the time, apparently. I'll read you a couple more. You ready?
I'm ready.
The character must go through a disgusting and humiliating sexual ritual and betray her closest friend to an evil end before she can properly serve her new master.
Oh God, is this the Vile?
This is Book of Vile Darkness yet again.
So the Vile Darkness one is Vile Darkness.
Yeah,
as the title says. I need to roll another wisdom saving throw.
you can roll. Maybe give me a history check. What'd you get? 5. Okay. Well, it's that you were correct. The Book of Vile Darkness, and it's edgy in that way.
Yeah.
This disgusting and humiliating sexual ritual. That's one of the few times the character's gendered. It's she for that one. Everything else
of course
is
it
they.
was. Yeah.
I'll give you another one.
Are you God? All right.
I'm gonna keep going. Because their powers derive from sex.
Ew.
Tantrists must be sexual
Yeah.
and cannot benefit from feats such as chaste life or pursue prestige classes such as the divine celibate.
The divine celibate. I feel like that's gotta be the not the divine.
That's the Book of Erotic Fantasy.
Yeah, the erotic fantasy one.
Yeah,
Book of Divine is just horrible
the
things
Book of Vile
happening.
Darkness is horrible shit. Yeah.
Yeah, horrible shit. In a
And then
horrible
Book of
dungeon.
Erotic Fantasy is like, it feels quite dated reading it now, but there's a lot of mechanics going on. There's a lot of thought, when they mention feats such as chaste life or prestige classes such as the divine celibate. Tantrist, by the way, is itself a class that you can play.
Yeah.
They put a lot of
but
thought
it's
into
sex
it.
positive, and there is just a level of sex positive is dangerous.
I'm going to read you one last quote. You ready?
Gosh, okay.
It's inappropriate and unfair for anyone else in the game to pressure, persuade, bribe, or influence someone to change their mind about a consent topic. They shouldn't argue why it's actually okay. The group shouldn't outvote them and make them accept a topic they're not comfortable with.
WotC's like never had that in a book statement ever, right? Like I don't think
Yeah,
I don't think
I mean-
consent at the table is that quote, like correct me if I'm wrong.
So-
like that's definitely the sex positive.
So first off,
yeah.
what you're saying,
Yeah.
the Wizards of the Coast has adopted a form of source book where at no point do they tell you how to play the game. They just tell you what the rules of the game are and assume
Yeah.
that you've seen other people play.
Yeah.
I think a lot about this in the context of that, like that interview with the RPG MP3 creator from 2008, where he's like, people listen to the podcast to figure out how to play these games.
Yeah.
Because you're totally right. The source books from WotC do not describe how to play it. They just tell you what the rules are and
Yeah.
assume that you know the rhythm of the game from other people. That's also not from the Book of Erotic Fantasy. The Book of Erotic Fantasy is also not great at talking through player consent.
Oh wow, that's from Vile Darkness.
That is from a completely different thing.
Oh what? Hey.
But okay. I know I bamboozle. I'm sorry, but that is so. The author of the Book of Vile Darkness, Monty Cook,
Monty Cook's the author
of the Book of Vile Darkness, and he put together a pretty decent guide on player consent in 2019. And that line is from, so people grow and change over time,
Yeah.
right? A decade and a half after releasing Book of Vile Darkness, he puts together a pretty good guide on player consent. We'll link to it in the show notes. It's free.
That's cool, Monty Cook.
Yeah. And I thought, it's called Consent in Gaming. I think it's quite thoughtful, actually. And but yeah, neither one of those books has safety tools.
Great. Awesome.
Anyway, that maybe gives you a flavor of what they were trying to crack down on in terms of objectionable content in the 2000s, as opposed to in the 2020s when they're trying to crack down on every form of third-party book ever, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole thing is like, it's kind of baffling, right? It's like this like big self-inflicted wound. The company climbed down from it pretty quickly. It's not clear from the outside what kind of internal decision-making process would make you be like, yes, this is a good idea. Mm-hmm. Like, you have that network externality theory. You've gotten all the externalities you can, right? And like, then they just kind of torpedoed that all at once.
I don't know. You gotta, once you build it, you gotta just burn it down, I guess.
I guess once this show becomes too successful, we're gonna have to figure out how to burn it
Torpedo,
down.
yeah. Well, yeah, Fountainhead.
The Fountainhead?
Ayn Rand, the Fountainhead.
I don't know Ayn Rand that well.
I don't either, but
Can you? You're gonna have to explain. That reference. You're
so
way more literary than me.
Fountainhead, dude designs the best building ever. They're using it in ways he doesn't agree with, so he has to destroy his creation.
Oh shit! Yeah. We'll tag this for spoilers because that feels like a pretty big Fountainhead spoiler.
A spoiler on the spoiler. I have actually not read the Fountainhead.
I was so impressed. I'm like, well, Riley's really read up on his libertarian literary fiction, I guess. Anyway,
let's wrap this up.
let's do that. The long run outcome looks like it's going to be shipped to Creative Commons. It's not terrible, but like, it's not really built for third party supplements. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Yeah,
I think with that, let's definitely wrap this one up.
Oh, time to wrap it up. Dun, 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 dun. You never give me the fun lines.
You literally had the fun lines in half the episodes. You don't in this one. And half of them you have the fun lines, and the other half I do.
Well, I guess that's all for this week.
I'm Dungeon Inspector Jake.
Oh, and I'm Production Master Riley.
Are you now?
God, I don't know. Not today.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe and leave a review.
It helps other people find the show.
And we'll also bless your party with thematically appropriate dice rolls.
For more on the show, including links to all our social media, visit folderfrequencies.com/campaign spotlight.